All right, guys. Are you always too old to learn a language? Is there like a certain age where like you just will stop learning languages, or like it'll become very hard? And through my experience, this is actually false, right? So I learned French when I was 15. I became fluent in a year, and I started to learn Japanese when I was 16, right? And I became fluent when I was like 18, and right now I'm 21. So that's the thing, right? I was able to learn two languages um, to a pretty good level. According to ChatGPT, I basically what I did was like I asked ChatGPT like, hey, look, these are the words that I'm learning right now, and I'm like Anking. I want you to guess my vocab range based off the words I give you, right? And according to ChatGPT, at least with the words that I'm learning, I'm at C1, and I'm like approaching C2 level. So that's for French. So my vocab, they said like I think my vocab was around like 10,000. So it's around 10,000, right? Now for Japanese, and I did the same thing. The words I'm learning, um, I just basically input it into ChatGPT, and I know roughly like 25,000 to 30,000 words. So that's basically like where my vocab is in Japanese, which is like three times higher than my French. So I've achieved like an extremely advanced level of Japanese. But here's the thing: the C1 of Japanese is a lot higher in vocabulary than C1 in French. For you to achieve C1 in French, you only need to know like where I am, like 10,000 words. But for you to reach C1 in Japanese, you're gonna know like you're gonna need to know like 20,000 words, or like 25,000 words, right? And then if you want to bridge the gap to like C2, which is like basically beyond native, you're gonna need to know like 30,000, 35,000 words, right? If you want to have complete mastery over like all the literature in Japanese. So like just the Japanese language is like super hard. Like it's just the vocabulary requirement for you to basically understand all media is much higher than French. So at least that's the thing, right? So but I was able to achieve like and learn like 25 to 30,000 words in Japanese, right? Over the course of like maybe 3 years. I think it's been 3 years since I've like been really going at it with Japanese. And you don't need to worry about your age, because the thing is that according to Stephen Krashen, we have this thing called the language acquisition device in our brains, right? It's a device in our brains that is solely dedicated to basically learning and acquiring languages. Because you have to think about us from an evolutionary perspective, right? We needed to communicate in tribes, right? We were very tribal people. We were very social creatures, right? What makes us different from all these other animals in the kingdoms is that humans have the ability to socialize, and that's language. So that's basically like the gift that God has given us when it comes to that differentiates us between other animals, is that we have the ability to communicate with language. And there's this language acquisition device that's in our brains that are not in monkeys, that are not in chimpanzees, that are not in like a tiger. Like a tiger doesn't have this language acquisition device that a human does. So that's what gives us the ability to speak language compared to other animals. And this language acquisition device always stays with you your entire life. It doesn't matter if you're like 50 years old or if you're 8. You're always going to have that language acquisition device. So how come adults that try to attempt to learn languages, how come they seem to have a harder time than little kids that seem to pick it up effortlessly? And what it has to come down to is it has to come down to the brain's plasticity. So you have to keep in mind that like when you're a newborn baby, your brain tries to soak up every knowledge possible. It tries to soak up every information possible, right? So, if there's Japanese in the background, your brain is going to absorb the Japanese, and the baby might just end up speaking Japanese without trying, without even ever paying attention to the TV. But when you're an adult, in order to improve and ameliorate the language that it already knows, right, it needs to solidify its brain and basically cut out unnecessary information. So this is why, like, if you put Chinese in the background and you're not fluent in Chinese, your brain is going to completely ignore and not even try to decode Chinese. But if you were a baby, if you were like a kid, if you were to put Chinese in the background, you would actually be able to pick some of it up, because your brain is still in like the soaking mode, right? Because you're still like an infant, you're a baby. So it's like it's going into like it's trying to soak up and absorb all the information in the universe, right? But when you're an adult, it becomes very efficient at cutting out unnecessary information. This is actually not a curse. This is actually a feature, right, of our brains. Our brains have like a limited capacity to pay attention to things. So like, why is our brain going to focus on a bunch of sounds that don't even actually matter? So that's why you can't just passively listen to Chinese or Japanese and get fluent. So that's why if you want to be able to learn language as an adult, you're going to have to you're gonna have to focus on this thing called deliberate practice. Deliberate practice is the key to telling your brain that these sounds actually have importance in that, they actually mean something, right? So that it's gonna actually learn the language, right? Your brain's gonna, get on with you to decoding language. So how do you do this? Well, it comes down to doing deliberate practice. Basically means like watching a TV show without subtitles. Without subtitles. Now here's the thing: people are gonna be like, "Oh, well, I don't understand the language. I don't understand language." Like, what do you mean? Like, no, you have to watch the TV show without subtitles. Like, it doesn't matter if you don't understand it. That's the whole point. The fact that you do not understand the TV show because there's no subtitles on is the entire reason why your brain is gonna even try to understand in the first place. Because if you're putting like English subtitles, you're not gonna acquire crap. Like, you see many people that watch tons of anime with English subtitles, and they don't know any Japanese. They only know like basic words like nakama or like nani, or like they only know basic words, right? But they're not like fluent in Japanese, right? Well, that's because they're putting on English subtitles. So the brains did not decide. The brains didn't deem Japanese as a worthy language because there was already help, the English subtitles. So they already knew what was going on. But like when you're watching anime without subtitles, now your brain has to turn on. Because now it's back to baby mode, right? Because now you're watching the anime and you don't understand any of the characters what they're saying. So now your brain's like, oh crap, like we don't understand this, and this person here is spending a bunch of time like watching anime all day, but not understanding anything. Now the brain is gonna start to figure it out and start to decode the patterns of the grammar and the vocabulary. So that's the difference between when a baby learns language and when an adult learns a language. It's just that adults have to put more effort towards doing more deliberate practice and paying attention to their immersion, whereas a baby doesn't really necessarily need to pay attention to their immersion. Like, if I were to have like a son, if I just put anime in the background, like my son will like, he would just like absorb the language. You know what I mean? Like this kid, he would just like absorb Japanese without trying. Like, it's gonna be that easy, right? Or like my kid could just like literally be passively watching anime like on the couch, right? Without even necessarily trying to understand it. But the kid's brain is going to be able to absorb the Japanese, and eventually the kid will be able to actually speak Japanese himself. And that's the difference between a baby and an adult, is that a kid does not need to put much effort towards learning a language because the brain will already deem it as useful because it's still in the infancy phase of basically the brain absorbing everything. Whereas like when you're an adult, your brain becomes solidified. So it tries to, cut out unnecessary information. So that's why, like, if you want to learn a language, you're going to have to deliberate a huge amount of time. You're going to have to commit a large amount of time doing a lot of deliberate practice, which is basically reading, trying to understand a text you don't know, or trying to watch a TV show without subtitles and trying to understand the language. That's the only way out, right? So that's how I was able to learn Japanese and, French, even when I was like, later. Now people might think like, 15 and 16 years old is still young. Maybe it's still relatively young, but right now I'm 21, so I'm probably like deemed as like an adult, I guess. So I'm gonna learn Arabic probably once I'm like 22. So like probably once I turn 22, and once I fully mastered what I've wanted with like French and Japanese, because I feel like I still haven't really mastered Japanese yet, but I'm like really close. And same with French. I haven't quite mastered the spoken language, right? But I'm like a little bit like I'm just right there, right? I'm just right there on the corner. I just need like put more effort, just like a couple more months of like hard work, and I'll be able to master both languages. And once I master both of these languages, then that's when I plan to learn Arabic and get on my journey towards learning Arabic, right? So yeah, guys, you guys can definitely learn language. It doesn't matter what age you are, right? You can learn language anytime. You just have to make sure that you're putting in effort, and you're doing deliberate practice, right? That's what you have to really make sure is like, the reason why most guys, most adults, when they go to language schools, they're not learning languages because you're not actually acquiring the language. So it's not that your brain cannot understand the language or it cannot learn the language. It's just that you're not using the correct method in the first place. If you're out here trying to do textbooks, memorize grammar drills, memorize vocabulary, even though memorizing vocabulary is a really good thing when combined with immersion, it's not a replacement for immersion. A lot of people like to replace immersion with a bunch of grammar and a bunch of school and formal teaching. And the reality is this just doesn't work. It doesn't adhere to the way our brains acquire languages. It doesn't adhere to it. You have to adhere to what our body does, right? Not what you think our body does. The grammar, formal instruction is a very outdated method of learning languages because there's a bunch of assumptions that come and arise from doing this, right? People assume that if you learn conscious grammar, that you somehow be able to, transfer that into a subconscious skill. But this is completely false, right? That's not the case at all. That's not how language works, right? You have to understand how the brain works when it comes to languages. And then you just basically do the right method in accordance to that. So that's why the best method to learn a language is to do a combination of a ton of immersion with spaced repetition Anki systems, right? So basically memorizing maybe 10 words a day, just 10 words. Don't even go too crazy, but just be diligent on memorizing 10 words a day, making 10 new flashcards, right? And then that's a supplement, right? And what that's going to do is that's going to help you understand more of your immersion, so that, let's say you have to watch a TV show and you learn this word in Anki in the morning, but you notice this word when you're watching TV show, boom, that was an opportunity for you to learn that word. Had you not done the Anki, you wouldn't have been able to notice that word. But because you memorized the word with Anki, now you're seeing how that word is used in a TV show. So this is why if you combine these both, you by far have the fastest ever progress when it comes to languages. This is the most efficient way to learn. And that's the way you guys should do it, because you can learn languages at a rapid way when you do this. And it just comes down to the way you do it. So that's why the age doesn't matter, guys. Age does not matter. It's just that your methods are wrong. Your methods, what you've been doing with language schools, just hasn't been working, because like I said, it doesn't adhere to the way our brains acquire languages. It doesn't adhere to it, okay? And if you want the subconscious, automatic way of processing language, you're going to have to do a lot of immersion and do a lot of deliberate practice. So that's the reality when it comes to language learning and age.